Today, the gender binary is often treated as an unbreakable law of nature. But if we rewind thousands of years to the very dawn of recorded history, we find a society that saw things differently. To the people of ancient Mesopotamia, existing outside of male and female was the source of a terrifying cosmic power. This region, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, is the undisputed cradle of civilization. These people invented the wheel and plotted the movement of the stars, and gave humanity its very first system of writing, known as cuneiform. Cuneiform is an ancient script made up of complex, wedge-shaped marks pressed directly into clay tablets. History's first recorded epic poem precedes the Iliad and even Gilgamesh. It is the Descent of Inanna, also known as Ishtar. She was the goddess of love, fertility, and war, a deeply paradoxical deity who ruled over both fierce battlefield combat and nighttime eroticism. Ishtar entirely rejected the traditional Mesopotamian expectations of being a dutiful wife or mother. Instead, she thrived in the gray areas, operating strictly on the boundaries between chaos and order, and between male and female. In some surviving hymns, she is even described as wearing a beard. To understand how these ancient engineers and astronomers truly viewed gender, we have to follow this liminal goddess on a journey into the absolute dark. According to the myth, Ishtar sets her sights on the land of no return. This is the shadowed, dust-filled realm of the dead, ruled by her furious sister, the queen of the Underworld, Ereshkigal. The Underworld operates under strict ancient rules that even gods cannot break. To enter, Ishtar passes through 7 gates. At each threshold, she surrenders a piece of her divine attire. Down she goes. Gate by gate, she is systematically stripped of her royal garments, her great crown, ear pendants, heavy chains, breast ornaments, and birthstone girdle. By the time she reaches the bottom, Ishtar is entirely naked and stripped of all her cosmic power. She is trapped, held hostage in the dark by the Queen of the Dead. Back on Earth, the consequences are immediate and catastrophic. With the goddess of love and fertility locked in hell, all intimacy ceases. The crops stop growing, animals stop breeding, and reproduction grinds to a halt. The universe is broken. And because the traditional gods of heaven and earth are strictly bound by the laws of life and death, they are completely powerless to stage a direct rescue. Enter Ea, the god of wisdom. He knows he cannot send a traditional man or a traditional woman down to the underworld. Those groups are bound by the rigid, binary laws of the living and the dead, meaning they would be permanently trapped alongside Ishtar. So Ea conceives a radical loophole. He gathers the clay of the earth and creates a new entity entirely, Assu-Shunamir. They are a eunuch, explicitly designed as a third gender to exist completely outside the established binary. This liminality is Assu-Shunamir's superpower. Because they exist in the space in between, the ancient laws of the underworld simply do not apply to them. They are entirely exempt from the rules. Assu-Shunamir descends into the dark and effortlessly bypasses the traps. They charm the Queen of the Dead, slipping right past her defenses to secure the ultimate prize, the mystical water of life. The crisis was solved. The savior was an individual uniquely equipped to bypass the rules of nature, precisely because they did not conform to them. Assu-Shunamir lived beyond the confines of myth. They reflected the actual people navigating Mesopotamian society. The ancient Mesopotamians cleanly divided their universe into the heavens above and the earth below. However, they believed that the in-between spaces, the ambiguous boundaries crossing from one realm to another, held profound, terrifying power. They filled these spaces with 3 distinct classes of non-binary clerics. The first were the Essenu, a term translating to man-woman in Akkadian cuneiform. Devoted entirely to Ishtar, the Essenu used their non-gendered status to act as healers, literally pulling sick citizens back from the threshold of death. Next were the Kurguru. This group deliberately blurred the lines of presentation, adopting a hyper-masculine warrior aesthetic complete with weapons and armor, while simultaneously performing feminine rituals and serving as women musicians. They harnessed this jarring dual nature to perform high-stakes cultic rites. Their job was to deliberately provoke chaotic divine fury through their boundary-crossing presence, and then musically soothe that exact same anger to protect the city. Finally, there were the Kalu. Historically, the job of singing laments for the dead was strictly reserved for women. Over time, these non-binary chanters completely took over the profession, adapting the feminine rituals into their own identity. They even sang exclusively in a distinct language called Emisal. Emisal literally translates to women's language or thin voice, and it was a highly specific dialect reserved in their culture only for women and goddesses. These three classes prove that being non-binary in Mesopotamia was an institutionalized, highly revered profession that required immense spiritual authority to bridge the gap between order and chaos. We see this exact reverence play out in the climax of the myth. Down in the absolute dark, Asu-Shunamir reaches the trapped goddess and sprinkles Ishtar's corpse with the stolen water of life, resurrecting her. Escaping the queen of the dead, Ishtar begins a victorious ascent back toward the surface. She passes back through the 7 gates in reverse, reclaiming her royal garments, her heavy jewels, and her terrifying cosmic power at every single step. There is a dark catch to her release. The scales of the universe demand a soul for a soul, so she is forced to send her husband, Dumuzi, down to the underworld as her permanent replacement. But as Ishtar steps out of the gates and back onto the surface, the crisis on Earth instantly breaks. Intimacy, fertility, and order flood back into the world, saving humanity from extinction. The Descent of Inanna functions as a divine mandate, explicitly decreeing that those who exist outside the binary belong before the king, in positions of supreme privilege. That ancient reverence stands in stark contrast to the reality we see today, where the gender binary is heavily enforced across much of the globe. In the modern world, transgender and non-binary individuals face intense societal friction, sweeping legal battles, and outright violence for existing between those rigid lines. These surviving, fire-baked clay records give us irrefutable proof of the past. They show us definitively that non-binary identities are not a modern invention, and they certainly aren't a new trend. Humanity's earliest writers believed that existing outside the gender binary granted a person the unique, sacred ability to walk into the darkness, bypass the laws of nature, and pull a dying world back toward the light.